Anytime now. All right, then welcome to the Bitcoin Design Community Call number 17. And so we have 3 topics on the agenda today, which one is what I suggested was open design funding, which I feel like I wanted to get the temperature to see what everybody wants to talk about. Maybe we can dismiss that one and talk about the other topics if those are more important. Patricia would like to talk about her research project. And then the hot topic of the moment seems to be how we add Lightning content to the guide. If you hover on this Jitsi call, you'll see this call started 4 hours, 20 minutes ago, which was the beginning. I think some of us have already. Johns, you've been in there since the beginning, and I think me too.
Yeah, it was early.
And Stephen was there for a good part of it too. So, and actually, probably 2 hours of that was just about Lightning and the guide and all kinds of Lightning-related topics. So if there's a lot of passion about that, we can ditch my open design funding topic, and we can just do a half an hour on Patricia's research and half an hour on Lightning. What are some opinions out there?
2 things sounds good.
Okay.
But I'm also gonna be relatively quick, so there's your hope.
Okay. Okay, cool. Then Patricia, why don't you take the floor and let us know what you'd like to talk about?
Okay. So essentially what I want today is to give an overview of what I got from my research and how I'm planning to structure it, so that I can ask you, like, what do you want from me and how can I help with the guide based on that? So it's just that. I mean, I'm not gonna be going through the whole content because there is no point there. It's still not ready, and I still have to work on it. But essentially, I'm gonna be saying stuff. But if you think that it's better for me to share, it's just because I'm gonna be sharing like a block of text, so I don't know if it's gonna be helpful. But so for those who don't know, I did a research plan based on user interviews with the objective of talking to people from different backgrounds. I tried to reach people from multiple countries, from multiple continents, and try to understand why they got into Bitcoin, what was their main use case for Bitcoin, and what were the main troubles that they went through in their journey. So what I wanted to learn from that is, well, who are the people who are using it a little bit, even though it's just a small sample, it's a qualitative study, but also to try to get from that, like, who are the people who could be using and that they are probably not using because they encountered the same challenges and maybe didn't get over those challenges. So what after doing the interviews, my idea in terms of structure for my report is to create user personas based on those interviews. It's not gonna be one persona for each interviewee, because I don't think this makes sense. I mean, in terms of design, I think we should have just a limited number of personas. So I'm gonna be doing a mix and match of the information that I got from them, and also to, like, for privacy's sake, so we don't have like a profile of people. And I'm also gonna be presenting some general insights. Like, for example, most users that I talked to had a problem with fees at some point. Most of them accidentally sent a transaction with a super high fee. So I'm gonna be getting some generic insights of this kind. And even though it's not a quantitative research, I felt like kind of a waste not to give at least some idea of the information that I got from the screening questionnaire that I did in the beginning. So I'm calling it like interesting facts because it's not an actual pool of people that is super relevant in terms of quantitative study, but it's interesting to think about it even so. So what I wanted to ask from you is basically, do you see this having a place in the guides that I can help you with? Because I know there's the design, the research section, which has resources there. If you like it, I'll be happy to add it there. But if you think that I could help also with content in the guide, like if you say that you want me to add some insights in contextual parts, like for example in the onboarding part, if you want me to add some insight that I got from a user that did the onboarding, I mean, any ideas that you have that you think that could be useful. I've noticed that the guide is very agnostic, and I think that's great because you're basically giving some idea of how people should find the information that they need about their users, but you're not like giving them a lot of information. So that's why I'm asking if it makes sense. And I mean, I don't know. I don't actually feel comfortable talking so much. So if you have any ideas.
Yeah. So so I would, from my perspective, user research has been really underrepresented in general in the community activity and in the guide, and we could use a lot more. And that's my, I also put the user research resources page is something that I primarily gathered since January and then turned into a page, and now also trying to, there's an issue or PR right now where we don't just list references, but we try to summarize each resource about what it's trying to do, what the findings were in very simple terms, with the goal then to hopefully also make it more useful, that research, because not everybody has time to go through a 20-page document and figure things out. It's easier if we can prepare these things and make them usable in the context. So I would think it would be fantastic if you shared those insights, and also if we could make them embed them directly in the guide where they are relevant, where people understand, okay, these are pain points that real people actually have, and this is why we need certain solutions. And it also helps people understand how to think about those problems that we're solving. So I'm all for it. Who else?
My commentary would be that I want to share kind of anecdotal experience / advice that comes from it, which is I don't remember who made it, but there was a recent research that was posted already in the Bitcoin Design Slack, and I shared it with Sergey at Bitreso, and we had a little private conversation about it, and the main takeaway was that it's just like explicitly hugely super important that the data set and the user set, the base, how the people are chosen, which people are chosen, the quantity of people that are chosen, like without that beginning thing being interesting to the person reading the report, the rest of the report is useless. Like Sergey basically dismissed the entire report just based off of looking the data of what it was made out of. He just said, this just can't be useful to me. And the reason I'm sharing this is because my advice is that anybody in this community working on anything to do with like gathering data from users should be asking for an interview with Sergey or somebody on his team that handles this for their company, because they do a lot. They are constantly asking their users questions. They're constantly keeping track of mixed panel data, etc. And so they're like, as far as I know, like the only company positioned to ask the kinds of questions they are, and the only ones actually doing it regularly all the time. And so they're basically like invaluable to this kind of topic. And so I would really recommend involving them in your research and seeing if you can get them to contribute data, or at least contribute advice as to like what would be useful to a company like them if they were reading a report.
Are you referring to Mix Research?
No.
Marucci?
Oh, I don't remember who did it. Yeah, it was like last week. Yeah.
Yeah, he's very aware of the limitations, and he called it a pilot, and so he's very aware of that.
I got the idea. I'm just sharing that like this was like I shared it anyway. Like I knew that it was small and there would be criticisms, but these things are always at least somewhat interesting, right?
But I totally agree that I think it's super important to kind of be public about the data itself and how it was gathered, and also look at the analysis a little bit separate, because there might be, like, you can post two different things, but allow people to kind of verify They don't just have trust. Just have to trust, right?
Yes. What I planning to do is I have a whole methodology section that I say, for example, why I'm doing user interviews, what was the objective with them, and how did I choose the users, because I sent a screening questionnaire, what were the countries of the users. But I think, as I mentioned here previously, I'm being very, very cautious in terms of what other specific profile information I give about the users for privacy reasons. Especially, I actually promised them that it was part of my proposal to keep it as something very private for them. For example, I'm going to say the countries that they come from, so that's why it's okay for me to say that. But I had an interviewee from Syria, and of course he can't have any kind of profile that is identifiable for him. But thank you for that. And yes, I'm trying to do my best to make it very transparent in terms of how did I get to the information. Of course, the user personas at the end are a product of my processing of the information. So I like to have this methodology section quite complete in terms of what I got from answers from the screening part.
And about the collaborations, I think, Johns, you had some experience with trying to collaborating with bigger companies to get research, and you've kind of had mixed feedback from that. We don't have to talk about it now, but I think it's super interesting, but I just believe it's maybe not always so simple.
Yeah, I did try sometime last year reaching out to some companies to see if because like a lot of these large companies in the space, they're conducting research themselves, their design teams. So it would be great if like they would be able to like contribute that back to open source. And yeah, unfortunately, one person may be interested in contributing that, but when it goes through the the ropes and all that, usually it's they don't have the time to process it, do the anonymization, or even if they did, they would want to publish it as something on their own for their own marketing. But what I suspect most of all is that companies kind of find this to be a kind of like secret sauce. So unless they have some kind of like marketing incentive to put it out, they wouldn't. So yeah, it's been quite difficult, but I think we should still continue trying to get them to contribute such research.
I would say in the case of Bitrefill, all of those things are potentially true. Where they would have similar perspectives, but the difference is that they also don't fully capitalize on their own ability to market their own data and publish it and package it. And so I think that you have some opportunity to kind of instigate them to do something through you or participate, because it means they would actually, that another PR thing would actually happen. But they will be guarded about certain kinds of data, and another difference with Bitrefill is they do have a dedicated person on the team for data, Matt Alborg, and he's already a public kind of data guy, and so they have a little more comfort with spending time on this kind of work, because like they literally fund it internally already.
Patricia, just in practical terms, in terms of where you might be looking at implementing some of this in the guide, there's the getting to know your user section in onboarding, which is very broad at the moment. And I did make an attempt at kind of a user story slash persona, but it is pretty much made up. So feel free to suggest a different format or rejig it as you kind of see fit. So that might be a good place to start if you're thinking about where to add stuff to the guide.
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
You could even maybe think of a way that you could pepper in like insights from your work throughout the guide as like quotes and narratives, like or flavor content, for each section. Like when we enter a new section, give me some user experience information or anecdotes about that section.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I was thinking about. Yeah, I think that's really interesting.
You have the wallet backup section, I think, that provides different methods or recommendations, ideas for different ways of backing up a wallet or storing them safely. And I could almost see something like for different types of users or levels of users. There could be like a recommendation to for this wallet backup method is recommended for this user persona, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna look at that also. So.
My internet just died for 2 minutes. I have no idea what happened. So.
I just kept talking.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah. I guess one other way to do it, I like using these like little like numbered citations. I know we've had discussions on like whether we should be using them or how we use them, but if there's some sections that are not maybe like if there's some parts where block quotes and stuff don't work, we could always like start tagging like certain sentences that it makes sense to like go off and like get more in-depth research and stuff using those citation links.
I'm not sure if I understood what it is.
So like in Markdown, you could do citations. Where
okay.
Like a number,
footnotes, right?
Yeah, like footnotes, yeah.
I removed mine when I was doing it because it felt way too academic, but I can see arguments for them.
I mean, like we could get like really creative where if it's like linking, like if you hover over it, then it shows you like the research project page. I don't know. Make it a bit more fancy maybe.
We can figure that out. If it's important information that we want to show people that's valuable to the design, then we'll find a way to add it.
Yeah, I guess like maybe like the first pass would be going through the guide and seeing where like some of these research points could be included, and then the next step would be figuring out how to like present it in like some other format.
Yeah, I think especially if you're making personas, then you can mention in the different sections which features are more important to certain personas and then link back to the persona research.
Yes, I mean, it's gonna be based on my interpretation of those personas, but we can see if it makes sense. I mean, I can make the proposals and we validate it after.
Yeah, I think I agree with a slightly more like hybrid approach of potentially finding a place in the design guide for kind of like persona sets or archetypes, which people who are new to designing Bitcoin applications can sort of pick and choose from. And then as was sort of mentioned by some others, just basically like cross-referencing those personas throughout the design guide for sort of applicable features.
Okay. Thank you. I'm just taking notes here. I think you're aware.
Patricia, I'm just kind of curious what feedback you were hoping for that we haven't given you yet, or how we can help you beyond this call, because I know we have to move on, but I really want to make sure that we're giving you the support that you need.
No, I mean, this is pretty much what I wanted to hear. Of course, you're not giving me final answers because we need to actually see the proposals that I'm going to make there in the guides and see what will make sense and what will not. But at least I wanted to have some idea of what made sense for me to propose there.
Okay, cool.
Anybody have any questions for Patricia? Now that she's on the stage, right in the center.
I'm pretty new to this group, but I am a UX designer and user researcher. So if you do need help with any of that, I'm happy to help. But I know there's privacy issues and you've got your own momentum, but happy to help in whatever way is useful.
Thank you.
One thing that I was thinking about is if some of these research facts or stories or so, if they could be good discussion points for social media, for workshops, for design explorations, that they just become more than just, on one hand, parts of a document, but they also become active conversation topics that we can somehow gather around in calls and design explorations and whatnot.
I think it has a good potential for that. I hope. I mean, I hope it's not just something that's going to stay on a paper. I think I hope we use it. So yes, absolutely. Confess that I'm a bit late with my own schedule. I can later tell you a bit why. It's not a secret, but something I'd rather not say in a recording. So
yeah, no worries. Anything else on Patricia's research? No, everybody good? Should we move on to the hot topic of the week? How to add lightning to the guide? Okay, everybody's just holding back. I can already tell.
Woohoo!
Let's do it.
No, let's do it. We've needed to do this for a while. It's time.
Okay. All right. So just to set the scene, I think so far we've kind of avoided it because the goal. I mean, we've spent 9 months or so on the guide itself, and initially it was really just figuring out what we're even doing with the guide, what form should it take. So Lightning was always kind of pushed back and intentionally excluded. But clearly, it's kind of the future of a ton of payments, and for a lot of Bitcoin users, they're going to use Lightning. So it was kind of, I think it was pretty clear that it has to be part of the guide. But it's also, there's a ton of complexity, there's a lot of content, tons of design and technical problems. And now the discussion has come up, then, well, how do we add it? What do we add? How do we go about it? And I really don't want to say a lot more than that. There are two camps right now. One person, which it will come up anyway, so I'll just say it. One camp is we'll have a separate section about Lightning, and the other camp is that Lightning will be part of the whole guide, almost as kind of the default way people use Lightning. And this is more kind of a view into the future. I don't know how many years down the road, but where Lightning is the primary entry point, which it is not right now. So I don't know. I think there are all kinds of different perspectives on this, and I'm just but I wanted to see, and a lot of people have their videos off, so maybe it's not so easy, but I'm just kind of curious, like, how much does everybody know about Lightning? Have you tried it? Are you kind of familiar with generally what it is and how it works and what role it has in the world of Bitcoin?
What I will say real quick on that is it's just really hard to learn, at least the technical aspects, not even design, just straight up the technical aspects. I did the chain code curriculum. I don't know if anybody else has done that on GitHub, and it's really awesome. But even then, it's mostly just videos. There's just not a lot of documentation or transcripts or anything. So I think even if you want to learn about Lightning, unless you're like developing it full time every day, it's actually just really difficult. So I would guess most of us, not just because we're designers, just because like the content isn't really there to learn about it in an accessible way. We probably don't know as much as we think we do.
So I just need to be annoying. If you're not talking, could you mute, please? Because there's a bit of feedback just in the name of the recording. Sorry.
Yeah.
Connor wants to hear me clearly.
I just want to add something. So the camps that you mentioned, yes, it's one of them being in its own section, and I guess one of them being default. But I don't know if this is a third camp or it's in like with the second. Do we intertwine the Lightning content with the on-chain content? I think would be a more fair representation of that second camp.
So going
So-
back to, sorry if I could just say one more thing. Going back to the beginning, I'm just kind of curious. So I use Lightning to give my son his allowance. He has a Moon wallet. I have a Blue wallet. He gets his allowance in Lightning. He thinks it's cool. But that's kind of my most regular use of Lightning at the moment. I'm just kind of curious. And I've donated to the biz.pro to unlock a podcast. I've tried out Y'alls and just some other stuff. But otherwise, I don't have a ton of use. How do you use Lightning, or do you not?
Bar tabs.
Bar
Me and my
tabs?
me and my friends in Atlanta, it'll be like, a bunch of us at the table, one person will, we'll cover the tab for everyone, and then we'll, settle up with our Lightning invoices.
Mhm.
And it's super quick. You see it settle right there. So
I think I was a bit the opposite of Patricia, actually, because the other Patricia, because I studied a lot of how Lightning works in the beginning, but I haven't used it like until a couple of months ago when I had to make some of these payments for the interviews that I did, and I found myself like I'm a newbie. I don't know. I have money that is on a Lightning wallet that I don't know how to take it from there back to Bitcoin, for example, and I was like surprised because I didn't know that invoices had like a deadline. So when I got to use stuff in Bitcoin I use it like as a non-technical user. So I always find myself with these funny situations, and in Lightning at the moment, I'm a bit like, not sure if I understand everything that I need to do.
Hey all. I have I guess a kind of story with Lightning. I've been using it to run a small home poker game. And it's been really great because of the small denomination. So we can do like 10,000 sats or something, or 100,000 sats, and it's like you have a lot of chips, but it's not a lot of money. But yeah, we've been using Blue Wallet as the bank, and everybody has like Phoenix wallets or Moon wallets, and we cash in and cash out with that. So that's been kind of fun.
So I think I want to jump in quickly. So just to scale the conversation back a little bit. So is everyone aware of why what the underlying issue is around using Lightning? As in, the reason we're using Lightning, right, is because there seems to be a consensus around this is the best way to scale Bitcoin to the next 100 million, 500 million, 1 billion users. And so with there being some consensus around that being the best method to achieve that, the assumption now becomes that most people interacting with Bitcoin will be via the Lightning Network and will be via like instant transactions. Now, there's a whole host of like technical things that you could argue you need to understand how one moves from layer 1 Bitcoin into the Lightning world, such as, channel management and opening and closing transactions and all of this stuff, inbound liquidity, outbound liquidity. Some people might not even know what those terms even mean. But if that is the assumption, then you can make a strong case for a lot of the stuff in the guide being obsolete very soon. And so if that is the case, then how do we go about implementing this? Because this is what's going to make Bitcoin more usable to the majority of people, and that's what we should be aiming for, I think, right? But I'm open to hear other.
I think you bring up
opinions.
an important thing, is that the way to make this decision is probably to think about the context. And I think that what you're going to find is in the guide, there's only going to be one way that you can treat this that actually works in the end. Like as you evolve and try to make this work, it's not going to be that one of these camps wins. It's going to be that probably both camps win. It's going to be because it works like this. Like, Lightning is Bitcoin. That's why it's the only tech that we're discussing in addition to Bitcoin for the guide. It just actually is Bitcoin. It's just a type of Bitcoin transaction, and then a special kind of handling that people do, like this, with like this punishment mechanism to make it possible. And so you can't have a Bitcoin design guide or say a Bitcoin Lightning design guide without having the Bitcoin design guide. Like you have to be able to understand and construct on-chain transactions and know what that means and those kinds of things before you can talk about doing Lightning ones. And so there's a kind of base layer, literally, that you have to establish from an understanding standpoint. Further, with Lightning, the context, and I think you'll find in the guide, is that Lightning specifically provides 3 qualities to Bitcoin that Bitcoin does not normally have. It provides the ability for high frequency transacting at low cost, for instant transacting without confirmations, and this one is a little trickier, to allow centralization. And basically, the concept of that, the user can still hold their keys and trust only a counterparty as like potentially being a nuisance. But this is important because it frames Lightning more as a service that is appropriate to economic, commercial situations. And it's going to be businesses that care a lot about Lightning and how it works. And it's going to be users using businesses and spending Bitcoin that care about being connected over Lightning to those businesses. So the context is important. You know, I haven't looked at the guide in a long time, but like somewhere you're going to start by talking about Bitcoin, and then at some point it's going to feel real stupid to not mention Lightning. And then those little occurrences will continue to happen as long as you are respecting that these are the qualities, these are the times you're supposed to use Lightning. These are the times that using Lightning will actually provide an enhanced user experience. If you use Lightning for other purposes, you will not be providing a good user experience. So you have to have it be contextual and appropriate to the aspect of the guide that you're talking about. And then no matter what, you are going to have a specialized section that deeps dives into the Lightning aspects separately, you know, about that layer than from the Bitcoin one. So even if we all imagine everybody's only going to be using Lightning in 10 years, well, we're not 10 years from now, we're right now, and we're in a transitionary period, so you need a transitionary guide.
I think that you know, in terms of having it as a separate section or, you know, compiled together, I think that, you know, I'd opt for kind of a hybrid approach there. Personally, you know, I've shared with some of you a kind of really super rough outline I wrote for stuff that I think would be useful in a Lightning section, which I'll post to Slack after this. But I think that there's a lot of things that are, you know, real absolute candidates for being fused with existing sections. So, I mean, like, obviously, you know, payments, like, I think it makes sense if we have a payment section, how to send a Bitcoin payment, how to send and how to receive. I think it would make perfect sense to include, you know, stuff about Lightning payments within the scope of those section, and just be like, if you're sending a payment on chain, you know, these are the design considerations. And if you're considering sending a payment over Lightning, these are the design considerations. But I do think there's also some chapters that are worth going over that, you know, don't really neatly fit into the on-chain paradigm, and particularly things like channel management. I think that's something that's just, you know, unique to Lightning that kind of necessitates its own section. Particularly also, I think sections around node management. I think that's a user interface, like particular things with like Raspberry Blitz and Umbrel and things like that. These kind of these node management software that's geared towards a different audience of people. It's the Umbrel, a project like that is not targeting the same audience as, say, someone who's compiling Bitcoin Core from source, right? And so that's a different type of user, a different type of design consideration to take into account. I think that kind of necessitates its own chapter or its own type of discussion. So, you know, that's personally what I would recommend, is just to conceptualize this as what can be merged with existing chapters and what needs its own separate discussion in the guide.
Mm-hmm. And I think before you go into how to structure this, you might at some point, you might even just not even think about it and really just list out the things that need to be said, the things that need to be written, and then you figure out how it all fits in. Does anybody have any questions about Lightning? We're kind of getting deep into certain topics here. Anybody have any questions that they want to ask?
Should a user know they're using Lightning?
No.
I have more of
What does that mean?
I think this is worth a completely separate call, to be honest. I think that's a great question, but in the interest of us like surviving this call, like there's so much to talk about.
No, I would like to stay on that for a couple of minutes though, because and just to just as a side note, we are going to discuss this in a lot more detail on Monday at the Design Guide Jam session. So if you want to discuss Lightning in deeper, please come along. But the reason I say that is because I feel like it is a very important question, because if you look at some of the wallets being built and trying to integrate Lightning, there is pretty much an attempt to differentiate the two. And like John just mentioned, Lightning is Bitcoin, and it should be treated as such in the user experience. So that's why I posed the question: should someone know they're using Lightning? And the argument, from my perspective, is probably not.
This reminds me of the should designers code question. But I think I go back to I think what John said earlier. Can you even answer this without context? Because if you consider this a global payments thing, then people in El Salvador, Germany, or Mongolia, wherever, maybe in some places you do, maybe in some places you don't. And maybe for some businesses you do, and for mainstream users you don't. I don't know how to answer questions like that, or give blanket answers like that. For the whole world.
So I think Alexa had something to say, but just before that, I want to just add to this. So we have to remember that the guide so far is talking about like mobile context, right? Mobile context. So yeah, I don't know if at some point we start like deviating and going into like desktop nodes or whatever other kinds of specialized UIs. And the question, like, should you know that you're using Lightning or not? I think that's well, like, I think you like if you have at some point the need to do an on-chain transaction, even though you have been doing Lightning transactions for the whole time, you will definitely see a difference, which is speed, right? That's the main quality that the user is going to end up feeling. It's like that's going to be the friction point on the user experience. So I just wanted to add that part in. Sorry, Alexa. Sorry for jumping in front of you.
I want to add one more thing as well, but I'm going to let Alexa talk because I've already interrupted her twice. So you go ahead.
Oh, that's okay.
Oh my God, poor Alexa.
We'll have some time. It's no problem. I just wanted to say that I think what Lightning offers is kind of a bridge between the because right now most people are using Bitcoin for investment or savings. And I think that's something that will remain on-chain just because of security reasons. But when you're trying to transition into everyday use, and that's where Lightning comes in, and it's amazing for that because it's instant and there's very small fees, tiny fees. And then you can purchase things that are much cheaper. So you can go and get your coffee with Lightning and it'll be fine. So I think it's two separate things that we're talking about here. One of them is this sort of thing that you'd use to keep secure. That would be on chain. And the other thing would be, just everyday things. And I think that is a good thing that is coming because a lot of people still cannot find something that they can do with Bitcoin every day, that kind of goes with your life every day. And Lightning is that thing that could push it there. But the other thing, and there's also privacy improvements there, just on the Lightning sense of everyday shopping, but security decreases. So all of those things are things that we need to cover.
I want to make a quick comment on privacy because one of my devs mentioned something when he saw privacy mentioned in one of the guide videos or such, and he made an important point that like this guide should be really careful about injecting, assumptions into the understanding of the people consuming the guide. And when you talk about calling something good privacy or more private, like these are very, very trappy words. Like you're not actually offering that, and you're really all you're saying is like relative to some other thing that I value less, you may have more potential to leak less data if you do it this way, or leak data that I consider to be less scary to leak, and so like I think just generally be careful with saying that something that somebody is choosing is better privacy or good privacy, because often it's a very subjective and kind of illusory concept.
On that privacy point, I think it's a matter of like how much like what you preserve, not what you get, or
privacy is lost, not gained.
Yeah, exactly.
Real quick, you guys, I think someone's had their hand up for a while, so I think maybe let's just take a quick pause. Naveen, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was about to say that as well. Naveen.
Oh, hey guys, I'm new here, but
welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Because we're talking about Lightning and assumptions being made, isn't the fact that Lightning is also Bitcoin like that sort of strong assumption to me, at least? And I am a newbie here, so feel free to kick me in the face.
What do you mean by that?
Say that again.
What do you mean by that? Explain.
By what?
But that Bitcoin is an assumption when talking about Lightning.
It is still an assumption, right? Because
it's objectively true. It's an objective fact.
Well,
you mean that Lightning is Bitcoin is an assumption? That's the question, right?
Yeah, it's not a fact to me, right? It might be a fact to other people, but
I can help you understand Lightning better to make it become a fact for you if you like.
Well, sure. This reminds me of the Leave Dev call with the meme. Like, can I be a core dev? We'll take that offline.
Naveen, before we start,
I'll do it right now.
I think we should hear out your full point, and then we should definitely let people help you out. But if you have anything else too, I don't want us to, dominate your point. Sure. You've been waiting for a while.
No, I just want to say that that's an assumption that the users might not share, and then maybe having a section that types of Bitcoin transactions as a section where we say, hey, this is one sort of transaction you can make on Bitcoin, and Lightning is another type of transaction you can make on Bitcoin. That might help, instead of saying in one voice for everybody, hey, this is what it is, deal with it.
Okay, so I think maybe I'm not sure where your uncertainty, I don't think you quite articulated where the actual uncertainty or assumption comes into play for you as far as why Lightning would even be thought of to not be an assumption. But your second question makes me less worried because it is what you just said. It's just a type of Bitcoin transaction, and that's why it quite literally is Bitcoin. And when I say that in this room, it's not to make some sort of ideological statement or impress something. It's that it quite literally is Bitcoin. Like when you look at the chain, a Lightning channel transaction looks just like a Bitcoin transaction, and it's made out of Bitcoin. And if a Lightning channel fails or the Lightning paradigm fails, the result is you get the Bitcoin in the same exact transaction, setup. Like it's just Bitcoin. Like as that's what's happening.
Kind of, right? Because if Lightning does bring, as you mentioned earlier, Lightning brings different types of transactions to Bitcoin. So on the one hand, yes. From another perspective, it's not exactly the same. But I don't know. I mean, it's a generic statement, right?
I guess we have to isolate when that matters, when the distinction actually matters.
Yeah. Well, let me put this. I mean, I'm in agreement as well that it is objectively is Bitcoin. I mean, anytime you open a channel, you're basically creating a 2 of 2, an address, that's a 2 of 2 multi-sig, and so you have Bitcoin locked up for any channel there, and you're essentially operating by passing each other transactions and signing them. So I agree that it is objectively Bitcoin, but the distinction, though, is that it's a different way of using Bitcoin, and it's a dramatically different way of using Bitcoin.
And it has different security assumptions, and
so
there are different risks.
And so that doesn't answer. So to me, the question is, well, should somebody know they're using Bitcoin, or should they know that they're using Lightning or not? I don't know. That's still an open question in my mind, because it is such a different way of using Bitcoin. Like to Alexa's point about, well, what if someone has savings and they have that in cold storage? Let's say it's a 2 of 3 multi-sig with hardware wallets in different locations or something like that. That's a very, very different way of using Bitcoin to me than having a Lightning wallet and having 2 or 3 channels open. And so it's still an open question in my mind.
Let's put it this way. Nobody would call an end time lock transaction not Bitcoin. Nobody would say, oh, that's not Bitcoin. But it works totally different than a normal Bitcoin transaction. Like you can't do anything with that Bitcoin till the block height is met. And that's a type of normal not standard, it's a type of commonly long available Bitcoin transaction that you can do. And nobody is saying, well, end time lock transactions are not technically Bitcoin,
Yeah, I'm no, go on, Kizzy.
To tie it back into the guide, but I think this framing is something that we need to be on the same page on. For one, how do we frame this to designers? And then how do we recommend this being framed to users? Because that's important then, that ideally all the wallets, all the different applications, they have a consistent view on Lightning that they provide to users. But and that's a really
commenting in
difficult
chat.
discussion.
And what I would say is that, like, give me a second. When we say should the person know they're using Lightning, the people answering no are not saying that people reading the guide should not know. They're saying that as a user experience, it should be avoided to do things like talk to the user about channels and networks and things that the user actually shouldn't really necessarily need to know to use Lightning. And so it's more about user experience of the actual application in the user, not about what to do in this guide, and to make the guide seem like Lightning is only Lightning is Bitcoin, and they don't need and tell your users that they don't need to know. And it's not that. It's not about withholding info. It's that it'd be a good user experience if they didn't have to deal with all the Lightning bullshit.
Yeah. And I guess to Stefan's point, like what are those parts that we have that are very specific to Lightning that would warrant its own section? I think the majority of it, whether it's private key management, whether it's things like automatic cloud backup or metadata channel state, payments, onboarding, pretty much. You look at applications like Moon or Breeze or whatever, like they feel just like on-chain Bitcoin applications. The send and receive flow, you still end up seeing a QR code at the end of the day. Of course, they've accepted certain kind of trade-offs, and those trade-offs may be things that we may have to talk to, especially trying to figure out if they align with like certain principles and whatnot. We have a principles page, but it's my standpoint that the majority of it can easily be overlaid.
So we have about 10 minutes left, and I was wondering who here would like to help with this. Is there anything you're passionate about? Anything that you would like to contribute to this Lightning section or content? Let's just call it content. Let's avoid the section topic. Who's down for it? Who's interested? Steven's down?
Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm down to help Steven.
Sweet.
I would say I'm always down to be brought in and made comments. If you ever want me to review and add comments to something, but I don't have a lot of time to actually say I can contribute.
I have something I'd like to share, screen share real quick. Would that be okay?
As long as it's no nudity, then yeah.
Yeah, there won't be any nudity, I promise. Hold on one second. I think this is something I just put together because I was trying to think about, I've been seeing a lot of this conversation about the complexity of, how much the user should be aware of. And I tend to talk, I'm sure people in this room have heard me, use the analogy of the web. I'm frequently comparing Bitcoin to the web because I think that they're both decentralized and kind of very important forces in the world. And, I've been just thinking about how we abstract away different technical details. And nowadays, you think back to 1992 or 3 and you're trying to hook up a network, very involved process. You're probably still dialing in. You're probably hand entering a lot of information in the boxes. And nowadays, where are we? If you're using a Mac, you probably have this little thing up at the top where you just select a Wi-Fi network. It probably selects it and joins a Wi-Fi network for you automatically. And anybody nowadays, even if you're not a technical user, you probably know to click this thing and go and select a Wi-Fi network. I think that's where we want to get to. We want, this to be that easy. But here's the thing. You can still get nerdy with it if you want to. You can go onto your Mac and you can go to your system preferences and you can click on network. And if you want to, you can go to the advanced network settings. That's what I'm calling these. And you can choose a little bit more options. You can still choose the same Wi-Fi networks and the same LANs and all that. But you got a couple other boxes you can check. Do you want to join it automatically or not? Right? Then if you want to get real super advanced with it, you can go and you can still drill down. And if you still want to manually enter IP addresses and subnets into boxes, that is totally an option you can do. Right? So Apple does a really good job, I think, of making it so that things are easy to use. But if you're a power user, you can still drill down and do all the cool stuff you want to do. So I took Christoph's wallet UI kit here, right? And I made a little Lightning wallet mock-up of what that would be. So you've got your little Lightning wallet here, right? You go into the settings menu, okay? Nodes and channels, go in there. This tells you, which nodes, which node you're connected to, which channels you have open. So if I tap the settings item, take me to another menu, nodes and channel settings. Okay. I can, by default, this would be an example, something Blue Wallet, by default connects you to their node, or Moon, by default connects you to their node. So, by default, you could just use whatever the company's node is, and you could just by default use their turbo channel. And if most people are not even going to get this deep into the menus because they're not necessarily going to be this power user. This is kind of analogous to your Wi-Fi menu. A lot of people aren't even going to get this deep. But people who do want to get this deep can uncheck this option here, and then suddenly they can add new channels. And you can see by default, they're connected to this turbo channel. They want to open a new channel. They can do that. They want to manage this channel. They can look at some metadata about that. Think of this as being analogous to something like this. So that's kind of what I'm in favor of personally, is just trying to not keep the power of Lightning and keep all the advanced features so that people have the freedom to do those sorts of things, but also hide that stuff many layers deep so that the surface level user experience is as easy as that.
Totally agree, man.
Good stuff.
Excellent. I want what is it? Sick wallet?
Sick pay.
Sick pay. Awesome.
I feel like we should just end on that, to be honest. That's pretty good. Very good.
That was awesome, Stephen.
Just one comment on the chat actually around. I think John said which user context again. I like that question actually, because I don't know how do I phrase this? Would TCP/IP or HTTPS or one of these protocols been designed differently had there been more knowledge of different societies, different geographies, different different environments? You'd argue not, right? It's just a communication channel. You could argue not. So I think that's that's the kind of argument that, like, I'm not saying I'm making an argument, but that's the kind of argument that some will make, that like Lightning is a protocol. So the way you communicate is the same regardless of whether you're a machine, whether you're a human being, whatever you are, right? So one could argue that the user, like, literally is everyone, and it's not that dependent on geography, where you're from, XYZ, because the protocol doesn't know that.
The protocol may not know that, but capabilities of the phone, the devices, the environment, the bandwidth, they would have impact more on Lightning than others. But those are areas that I'm not sure. We definitely should explore in the guide in the short term. I think there's still a lot of development that's happening on the technology, on the protocol. People are working to try to get it running in more low bandwidth environments and low capacity devices. But for the content that we have on the site right now, it's pretty much geared towards like, hey, you know, you have an iPhone or Android. So, I mean, like, I just think it's natural to go with that one for now. And as more research comes up, we start contextualizing it, I guess.
The development of Lightning is an important point. Like this guide will expire within a year. Like Lightning is still advancing, and the best practices of how to accomplish good user experiences will definitely change in the next even 3 months, with things that are going to be available or more developed to provide better user experiences. Which will mean like things like, you know, in the current guide you might say, you know, open channels to whoever you like, blah, 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 and be very lax about it. And then in a year, it might be like very evident like that. Really, people should be prioritizing just one channel and how to pick, you know, who to open a channel to, and that becomes a user experience concern. Like, things are just going to keep changing. We have trampoline payments, hosted channels. Like, there's going to be so many like ends into the rabbit hole that you can find yourself in.
And the base layer is also going to be evolving as well. It's not like development's gonna like end up stopping there. We are gonna
much slower though. Like I would say maybe every 2 years you'll have a new thing to talk about. Fair
enough, but if we're looking at a 10-year span, I think you brought up earlier, you know, we are going to be having scaling solutions happening on chain as well. Schnorr, Taproot, and whatever else that's gonna evolve.
Yeah, our current pace is about every 2 to 4 years we get something that actually affects user experience in wallets and such. Yeah.
So we have consensus. We have the content intertwined and overlaid. I'm kidding. No decisions on calls.
Well, I think in the end you do kind of have to make a Lightning guide first, kind of like as a process, right? Like you have to like Chris was saying, like you have to kind of isolate all the things you need to actually talk about Lightning. So you kind of have to do the Lightning guide first, and then talk about how to integrate it into the